Joey, you continue to amaze me how good you count. So, thank you. We're going to call the meeting to order. There's an opportunity for citizen comments for items that we're not discussing on the agenda, and I have no speaker cards for that. So we'll go on and call the roll. Alderman Barnhill.
Here.
Alderman Blanton. Here. Alderman Caesar.
Present.
Alderman Peterson.
Here.
Alderman Berger has notified us she's running behind. Vice Mayor Brown.
Present.
Alderman Potts.
Present.
Alderman Baggett.
Present.
And the mayor is here also. So we'll go on to item number 1. Looks like we're already lined up, ready to roll on discussion of an update to the Historic Parks audio tour, a subcommittee project of the Civil War Historic Commission.
Thank you. My name is Elizabeth Goulet, and I'm the Assistant Preservation Planner, and I serve as one of the staff liaisons for the Civil War Historical Commission and the Historical Parks Audio Tour Subcommittee. With me this evening, I have subcommittee co-chairs Colby Lane Hogan and Heather Doleshell, as well as our Civil War Historical Commission Chair, Mr. Alan Sims. And first of all, I would like to thank all of the members of our subcommittee for the hard work put into making this update to the tour possible. This project has been in the works for some time now, and I'm glad to be able to support the subcommittee through this process. The Historic Parks Audio Tour Subcommittee has been diligently working to update the existing Parks Audio Tour, and we are here to provide a status update to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen of the Parks Audio Tour to continue to move forward with our update. So if you are not familiar with the Historic Parks Audio Tour, here is a little bit of background. The City of Franklin has an existing Historic Parks Audio Tour that guides listeners through 6 historic parks along with other historic sites throughout the city. And this program was introduced in 2012 by the Civil War Historic Commission and the Parks Department. The program utilizes a dial-by-cell program operating system for visitors to call in and learn about the history of Franklin. To begin your tour, you call a number listed on an on-site sign and enter the appropriate stop number associated with the sign, and you may disconnect and rejoin by calling the number again at any of the stops. Each stop has an audio tour sign on-site with instructions on how to use the operating system. Additionally, the existing tour is available on the city's YouTube page and with access through the Parks Department webpage on the city's website. Most of our tour stops are also available in Spanish through this platform. So what are our goals and reasons for updating the audio tour? There are 3 primary goals that can summarize why we are performing this update. The first goal is to expand upon the narrative of the history of Franklin and to bridge the existing stops in order to tell a more complete story of our history. The audio tour is centered around the Civil War, and with the update, we will introduce information about related post-war events and the era of Reconstruction, which has been focused on a date range of about 1863 to 1877. The second goal of the update is to edit the presentation of the audio, including verbiage, sound effects, and new recordings for listeners. The existing recordings will be preserved on the city's webpage and YouTube page. The third goal is to update the platform on which the tour is housed and presented to tourists and residents. The current dial-by-cell program is a little dated, and we would like to engage and provide the listeners with a more immersive experience with an accessible platform. And this would also provide additional opportunities to engage visitors and residents. So the following items are the logistics and specifics to our update of the tour. There are 6 new stops added in the downtown core that expand upon the rich history of the buildings and the people who shaped the development of Main Street, and the narrative of Reconstruction to tell that more complete story of Main Street. Additional new stops include the John Carruthers House, the Natchez Street neighborhood, the Merrill Williams House, and the Franklin Grove campus, as well as the Shorter Chapel AME. The new stops will help to expand on that more wholesome story of our history. And so, in addition to new stops being created, we are refining 9 existing stops into 5 stops, minor modifications to the remaining 5 stops, and updating the platform and updating on-site signage to reflect that updated platform. So here is a more visual representation of the additions to the audio tour. On the left-hand side of the map shows the existing tour, and on the right-hand side is the added blue dots that show where the new stops are being added. And so with these additions, we're adding more to the downtown core, but we are adding more stops throughout all of Franklin as well to tell a more fuller story of Franklin outside of just the downtown core. So now we will have an opportunity to go over all of the stops that we have in the tour. And this first set of slides will have the existing overview of stop overview. And so these are just stops that are being refined, in some ways being combined from multiple stops at one location into one audio stop, and just refining that audio recording on these. So that'll be the audio tour overview that is existing, the overview of the Battle of Franklin, the assault on the Cotton Gin, Carter House, and the Lots House, the City Cemetery and Rest Haven Cemetery stop, the park at Harlansdale, Fort Granger and Roper's Knob, Winstead Hill, Collins Farm, Eastern Flank and Carton, and the McGavick Confederate Cemetery. So these are all stops that are just being refined. And if you want me to slow down so you could read the descriptions on any of these, just let me know. And then we'll move on to the new stops that are being proposed to be added. And so these, as I've mentioned, will help to bridge that history between the existing stops and tell that more complete story and narrative of the history of Franklin. And so with that, we'll be doing a stop on the downtown churches, A&C Williams and the businesses on Main Street, the square, Franklin Masonic Hall, the Wiley Methodist Episcopal Church and Pull Tight Players Theater, the Lily Mills and Bucket of Blood neighborhood, John Carruthers House, the Macklemore House, Hard Bargain neighborhood, and the Toussaint Louverture Cemetery, the Shorter Chapel AME, Merrill Williams House, and the Natchez Street neighborhood, and the Franklin Grove and Perkins Winstead House. So as we move on, in addition to updating the audio tour stops, we would like to move towards updating the platform on which the tour is housed to be a more engaging and interactive web-based program. This would provide opportunities to be more user-friendly and engaging with additional capabilities through the platform, such as housing additional information related to the stops, historic photographs, the ability to map and find the next stop on a tour, retaining the existing audio and new audio in one location, providing written descriptions of the audio recordings and other media and related documents related to a stop. With the update to the platform, this would also provide an opportunity to add more stops in the future or future different tours, and to house them in one central location to share the history of Franklin to both residents and visitors. So we want to share a preview of the web-based program that has these capabilities and features for this proposed update. So we have gone to the IT steering committee. We've gone to the IT steering committee along with our Parks Department representatives and received a green light to proceed with attaining this program. The Parks Department has agreed to absorb the cost of this new program for the initial 2 years, which will cover those expenses. And so here is a link to the Stained Glass Tour in Butte, Montana. And this tour utilizes the CurateScape web-based program. And so this was a program that was developed by historians for more historical storytelling. And so this program would take us to the next level in our ability to share our history and tell more people about Franklin. And it's a best-in-class program that is available with all of the functions that we are looking for. And so as we look at this stained glass tour, you can scroll down and see the written description of the overall tour. As you continue down, you can see the individual tour stops that are associated on this tour. So you can see all of them, and then you can also see individual stops on a map. And then you can zoom out and see where other related tour stops are related on this specific tour. And so as you click on a specific stop, you'll also have the ability to read and explore other information that is specific to one stop. So this includes those capabilities of having historic imagery, additional written descriptions and information that would be really helpful to not just visitors trying to learn history, but also local residents, and being accessible to teachers and classrooms so that we could house more information for them. So we have the capabilities of imagery and other media. We've got the mapping ability again here, and then also the ability to source and cite all of our information that we have here. And so this program, as we go back up, you can just see all of the historical sites in a city with a broad overview of just the sites. You can also click and see all the different tours that are offered. And so these are in total in the city, there are 19 tours, and you can explore and have all types of tours. So there's a lot of potential to expand in the future. And then you can also see all of the sites on one map that may have historical significance. So this could really help with visitors and local residents when you're exploring town and you stumble upon one historical site, you may not realize there's so much more around you, and this can connect you to other places as well. So along with the update to the platform, this would require an update to on-site signage, as currently it's reflected on the left here of how to use the operating system with that dial by cell program. And so with the update, we would like to have more distinctive and recognizable historical markers associated with each stop, so that when you arrive on a stop, you can identify that this is a historical place, and there would be more association to go and utilize the disc that would be utilized for the explanation of how to use the new program with a link to the QR code for the website. And you also are able to download an app and utilize that for the function of attaining all of the information. And so the signage related to the tour and accessing the online app would be on this disc. So if there is existing on-site signage, we would be able to just attach the instructions on this disc to those and not have to update all of the signage on site as well. So that is all we have for the update. So if there's any questions, we are more than happy to answer them.
Alderman Blanton.
No, this is awesome. I mean, just when we started this, it was great to look to the left at this image of where we started. It's a good thing we're refreshing because it's a little dated. One question and then one comment. So we're not going to add the disc and the sign at all these places, just the disc. And if there is already a historical marker, you're going to add that disc to the base of it. Is that correct?
Yes, so that function would be, if there's on-site signage that's existing that we can utilize, we would hope to be able to, yes.
Awesome. And I would suggest that we add the Jimmy Gentry statue to the list of telling the story. Lisa, did you hear me? Okay. Well, I just think it's great because we have the plaque, but I think it would be a great when you do another round and add things to, if you could add that to the list.
I've got Alderman Potts, and then I have Alderman Baggett.
Yeah. First and foremost, thank you all for putting this together, and everybody that's not sitting at the table, please tell them thank you. I think this is great, being able to geek out on this history and just dig in hard. I think it's a phenomenal opportunity. I think it's going to transcend across a couple of different generations right now, as y'all are well informed. One of the things that I look at is the data. Can you tell us a little bit about the reporting aspects that you'll have access to through the web page and also doing some tracking?
Yeah, so even with the existing dial by cell program, we do get quite extensive data reporting from that. And I believe having, with the online web-based program, you still would be able to track foot traffic onto the site.
And is that something that you'll bring back or present to BOMA in the future to give us a report of, or to our tourism department?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. And then
As long as everyone agrees, yes.
Yeah. And then the last thing that I have is there a means in which someone could suggest, just like Brandy did, because I thought the same thing, is there a suggestion link or an option for future or potential sites?
I know after we complete this first tour, there are many tours that I believe our commission would like to work on, but our goal is to finalize this first one, and if we have the ability to put a suggestion on the website to have tour stops, I believe that would be something that would be looked into.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
The longest part of all of this has been which ones we're going to add, and I think we have plans C, B, D, all the way to Z. There's so much to include, but it's actually really exciting because once we get this first round, the platform is so much easier then to add, whereas they've done a lot of research to find out what we can transition to, and then how we can start moving in the direction of adding all those other stops, because there's a lot to add. So any suggestions, we have a list that we'd be happy to add to.
Alderman Baggett.
Two things. One, and I'm glad you're on there because the Visitors Bureau, we don't want to duplicate efforts, and I think that's important to have this be kind of kind of a hub, and we're paying for the software and allowing community partners such as BOFT or the Heritage Foundation or others, and then this is something the commission can talk about. But that's a huge opportunity because I know y'all spent, I mean, I've been on that commission for 3 years, and this has been going on for at least that long, and then probably longer. And there's a lot of work that y'all did on the script and everything they have done, and I think that is a really great opportunity for us to use these public-private partnerships with nonprofits that are already doing this work to build this thing out. So that's commission work, but I would encourage us to do that and maybe communicate with these other nonprofits and historic organizations where we come up with some process how we would allow their specific tour that they pulled all the information together, and we're a receptacle, and because I think that'd be great. Second thing is the signage. I think I would just say correlate or to tie it before we start putting up signs, in our preservation plan that Kelly is working on, and the whole preservation, and well, everyone's working on planning in the historic world. But I think really coordinating that plan with the signs and having that be a part, like what does the public want to see? How, getting that public feedback for how they want to identify these, instead of us quickly going and putting up signs, kind of making sure that kind of works cohesively with that preservation plan, so we don't, step on toes or miss an opportunity really in that preservation plan, because what might come out of that might be related to signage and how we identify some of our preservation or our historic sites and that kind of thing. So I would just say, that was my other comment, is just kind of maybe hold off on these signs until we get a signage plan for if that's a part of the preservation plan, which I would guess it would be. Thank you.
Was Toussaint Louverture on that list?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Great. Anybody else? Okay. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you.
Good job. Development Activity Report. Catherine, where are you?
So we are giving you your kind of regular update. This would encompass the conclusion of fiscal year 24 in terms of development activity, and that also aligns with the first 6 months of calendar year 2024. So Catherine, take it away.
Thank you. Here. Good afternoon, everyone. Like Eric said, this is our quarterly development activity report. This will be a little bit different than your normal mid-year. Since this presentation was a little bit delayed, we're actually doing the first 3 quarters of 2024, and we're still going to go over your fiscal year 24 development activity. So we're going to start with 2024. So this is development activity from January 1st through the end of September, so September 30th. And what you'll see is we've actually had a pretty strong 9 months. You'll see at the top, total permits issued, we had 5,373 permits. Of that, 925 of them were building permits. We had 4,093 trade permits, so that's your mechanical, your plumbing, and electrical. 43 swimming pool permits, 42 demolitions, and as far as other permits, a lot of the times those are really small ones like floodplain or parking pad permits. But in 2023 and 24, you'll see that there was a pretty big increase. That's because we created and started issuing fire suppression permits. So that actually takes up the vast majority of what you'll see in that other section. Yeah.
Is this year-to-date for 20, 21, 22, and 23, or is this?
This
full
is
year?
all the first 3 quarters of each year. So January 1st through September 30th of each. So I wanted to make sure it's an apples-to-apples comparison. And then when you look at impact fees, again, you'll see at the very bottom, we actually reflect pretty strong activity in collections. Road impact fees, you had about $6.3 million collected through the first 9 months. Water impact fees, it's about $925,000. Sewer, it's about $4.5 million. And with city facilities tax, we collected about $1.6 million. I do want to note with water and sewer, this was the first 9 months of the new impact fees being implemented. So that is reflected here. That is why it's such a stark increase. On top of
having higher development activity than we did in the first 9 months of 2023. So I do want to say that the increase is reflected in here. But you also see with construction valuation, we did have a very big increase in 9 months. So for the total construction valuation of the permits for the first 9 months was $647.5 million. That's a 117% increase from September of 23. And I do know that we did have a bit of a dip in 23, so I even wanted to reflect that's a 15% increase from even September of 2022. You'll also see these increases reflected in the fiscal year later in the presentation. And even with new dwelling units added, last year we did not see any multifamily permitted, but this year that's a different story. We've added 199 single-family homes as far as permitted, 522 multifamily units, and 150 townhomes. And of those multifamily, we permitted the Optima, which is about 322 units, and Wood Duck Court, which is about 178. And so now we're going to move on to fiscal 24, and you're going to see a lot of the same trends reflected here. When you look at total permits issued in fiscal year 24, we issued a total of 6,625 permits. That is the highest in the last 5 years. It's a total of 1,103 building permits, about a little over 5,000 trade permits, and you can even go down with other permits again. About 270 of them are, that 322 are the fire suppression permits that we've added. And again, with impact fees, if you'll see at the bottom, it is actually, for road impact fees, it is incorrect on your packets. I just made that change today. It is actually $9.2 million, not 6.8. But the city has collected in fiscal 24 a total of $9.2 million in road impact fees, a little over $834,000 in water impact fees. Sewer impact fees about $5 million, and city facilities tax is about 2.3. Usually trends are reflected the same. I just want to note that when you're looking at the calendar year versus the fiscal year, you're not actually looking at the exact same timeframes, because fiscal year starts July 1st. So fiscal year 24, it starts July 1st of 2023. So I just want to make sure sometimes the timeframes are a little different, so numbers might look a little different. And
What
even,
is- what- Go ahead, Alderman
Go back
Barnhill.
to that.
Yes.
To the other one. Why is, explain to it just a little bit. You've got water impact fees of 834 and sewer.
yes.
5 million.
So
So is that because there's 3 or 4 other water utility districts that's,
yes, that's part of it. So
Okay.
we do not serve the entire city with water. And also when I talked about there's different time frames too. So with the fiscal year, you had 6 months where we had the old impact fees
Okay.
as well. So
And
I
you've
just-
got a higher, sewer impact fee is a higher level
Yes.
than water impact fee generally
but
as
not
well.
5 times, which is what.
Well, yeah, you've got, well, Catherine explained it, the water district
I
alignment
understand.
is a big piece of it, and there is a difference in fees.
yes.
Yes.
Yes, we
correct.
do sewer for everybody, and a lot of our water district, a lot of places are built out. So,
There's probably an answer, but the correlation between your road impact fees in 2020 and 24, there were less permits in 24 than 20.
yeah,
Road impact fees were higher in 20 than 24. And sewer impact fees are in the right kind of correlation, I'd think, because of the change and then also just the direct, I feel like that's directionally opposite. Is that because
Are you-
development maybe?
yes. So are you asking
Okay.
why 2020 road impact fees are higher than in 2024, even though?
With less,
With fewer permits?
With fewer
Yes.
permits.
That's all based off the type of development. So right
Yeah,
now.
one really large project could drive a
Yeah, exactly.
bigger impact fee
permit and they owe
number.
it all at once.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
for example, we're not permitting nearly as much of office. An office would probably
Okay.
drive a fair amount of road impact
That's probably
fees.
like McEwen, like some of the McEwen things
Yes.
and that kind of.
Good guess, yeah.
So when you go to construction value of the permits, in fiscal year '24, it rose to $861 million. And that's a 13% increase from last fiscal year. So what this continues to tell us, and even last year when we saw a dip in development activity, is that the level of investment that's happening in this community is still pretty robust. Because it's showing us that even though maybe the permit numbers have decreased, the types of developments that we're seeing are providing a big investment to our community. And just reflecting the new dwelling units, this is pretty similar to what the 3 quarters of 2024 look like. But with the whole fiscal year, we permitted 247 single-family homes. That was the same 522 multifamily units and 155 townhomes. So there's still a lot of development happening on the residential side. You've got developments like West Haven, Southbrook, South Vale, and Water's Edge all still permitting pretty robustly and building out. And we've actually started seeing a couple of new subdivisions get to the permitting process, like Poplar Farms. So we are seeing projects come down the pipeline and actually get to the permitting process and actually start going vertical. And just to wrap it up, we did see a decrease in development activity last year, but what we've seen so far in the last 9 months is kind of seen a rebound of activity, and we're seeing more come down the pipeline. And this really reflects a lot of the strong plan review activity we've seen in the last few years. So what we are seeing is that the developments and the projects that are going through our entitlement process, we are seeing them come to the permitting and construction phase, and so they are getting built. But with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Anybody? Ready to keep rolling? Good job. Good job, Kathy. Next is Alderman Baggett. You want to talk about City Hall commercial space options?
And I'll also lean on Eric here as well, because this is a preliminary kind of just idea, because I think as we get into City Hall development, this could take some time. We went through the City Hall process design, and I believe it was 4% could be commercial use, and we decided to do that to activate the 3rd Avenue corridor. And so we would have some decisions to make on how to do that, how to utilize that space. And in talking with the Downtown Franklin Association and having that relationship, and also knowing the kind of pressures that our downtown merchants have, especially locally owned specialty shops that really, that's really why people come and visit Franklin. And in some conversations preliminarily with the chamber and other folks, that I think there's a real opportunity here for the city to use this space not only as to activate that side of City Hall, but also as a public use in supporting our downtown merchants, and thinking through that in a way that would not impact the market of the downtown office, but also intentionally thinking about how we might do that. I don't have the solution, but that was what this discussion was for, and I would venture to say that most of us up here probably don't have the exact solution. And so discussion on how we might proceed, and wanted to have this open discussion with Eric and hear his thoughts on how we might assemble a team of staff and chamber and the DFA, and so we come up with a really good community solution. The chamber brought up something related to the EIC. Students have their products. I think it's going to be a combination of things, but or it could be a master lease, or it could, like, all these things that are options that in our regular day-to-day professions we don't work with. But I think we need to be intentional about thinking about that and making sure that that space is used to support our downtown merchant community, the thriving of that community.
I would just add a little bit to that in terms of what are some of the base assumptions we've made to this point, and glad to hear feedback or guidance related to that. But it has also been that we've thought of that space as largely a retail or restaurant type of use. That seemed to make sense. An office use or that type of thing didn't really seem to fit. We want something that generates activity. I think especially a restaurant use, maybe adjacent to the park where there's sort of that plaza gathering area, that just seemed to be sort of a logical fit. So those are just some general concepts. We also had generally anticipated that we would work through somebody who works in that business in terms of leasing and managing commercial space. That wouldn't be a place that we really have that capability, and that we would rely on someone with that expertise that we would contract with and that would work on our behalf. But we certainly could provide some guidance around the types of uses that are a fit for the community, for the neighborhood that abuts it, and a good fit for City Hall overall. So the idea has always been to bring activity down Third that fits. It's a great connector to the park that is going to be a wonderful asset as well. So we're interested in hearing some of those thoughts and engaging DFA, engaging our neighbors, and thinking about what are some of the things that would be great to see. I think there's a little bit of flexibility that it could be 2 or 3 entities depending on how you do the space. Obviously, it would vary on the type of use a little bit, but you do have some flexibility, and we would want to do something that is uniquely Franklin, has that Franklin character that it makes downtown so attractive. So yeah, we don't want a chain restaurant or store. We want something that has that unique flavor, is I think our general sense of what we envision seeing here.
And I was just going to say that I think there's a lot of demand for downtown space, so we're in a good place. Go ahead, Alderman Berger, and then I'll get the Vice Mayor.
Yeah, I agree. There's going to be a lot of demand, I think, for that, because we're looking for more businesses down here. But I agree with what you said, Eric, about the park setting. I really want to see some kind of eatery, restaurant next to that park, because that lends itself to just go outside and be in that area. And I think that would, and we have to look at the free market. We really don't, I really don't want to get into having committees select, what kind of things do we want there. I mean, I think we ought to be talking about what kinds of things we want there. But we really need to have, let whoever we hire to do that know what we're looking for in those spaces. And I agree with the office thing is probably not ideal for what we need. I think it needs to be more activated. And I don't want to see just something is going to be open like one part of the day, like just a breakfast place or whatever. It should be, some place that's going to be open and drawing patrons all day long, if we can do that. And I really want to, and I think you're talking to this too, Patrick, local, really keeping our local people here and not doing any chains kind of things there, because it just really doesn't fit the atmosphere that we want to keep Main Street more local. And that's who we are. We're a historic city. I think we have to be very careful, but there's a lot of things that will come our way for that. Thanks.
Vice Mayor.
A couple thoughts. First of all, definitely agree with bringing in some experts to actually lead that process for us. I do like the idea of an eatery. Obviously, that's a much bigger installation and maybe a little less nimble equipment and all of that. It's a very different installation than a retail. Honestly, I really loved what I heard from Seaside in terms of their idea of helping businesses get started, and then once sort of on their feet, they sort of move on. And I think affordability of a local business starting, finding their way onto Main Street is a challenge. If the city could play a role in providing a space that's maybe a little less expensive, help a business get started, help an entrepreneur get started with a retail location. Maybe we used to have the place where you could have, it could be subdivided into several places, get them started, get them up on their feet. They go then and find their own little storefront. That could be an interesting model, whether that's EIC or whether that's somebody later on in life that wants to start a retail location. That could be a really neat use of that space.
Okay, that's a good question, Matt. So maybe something like that, one space, not just one space, that we could allot to that, but also they would have the opportunity to grow in that space and do well. And if they do well, they have the opportunity then to pay a little higher rent and stay in that space. Sure. Possibly. Yeah. Thanks.
We've got Alderman Potts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think it's a great idea, Eric, for us to bring in an expert in the fields. I do think that we need to figure out how we're going to activate this area, and I concur with what was previously said. I think that we do need to stay local. That's that golden thread that attracts so many people to our downtown area. And the walkability, I know, with the Downtown Association is extremely important. Still kind of wonder how those businesses may need parking and how will support their parking needs as we move forward. I think that we probably got that. But I definitely want to see this starting small business, and even if it's a generational business, I think could also be of benefit. It's something that's truly Franklin.
Alderman Blanton.
I think too that we need to balance what the staff might need without having to get in their car and go somewhere. I mean, back in the old days, some of y'all remember that we had our own office supply store at Beatty's on Main Street. Those days are gone, and office supplies come, at the point of a button. I also think it's important that we kind of take stock of what's already in our 16 block radius. How many coffee shops we already have, how many pizza places, so that we're not hurting our existing businesses by adding another opportunity for something that's already there. There's going to be times where there's going to be overlap, and that's done a lot in the retail arena where you've got exclusivity on a certain brand so that people can sell it. So I think knowing what we have is going to be important to know what we want. I think there's a little bit of concern when you think about how close the park is to some of the residential areas and business hours. Some people, make their nut on 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., but not everybody can do that. What are our hours going to be on the park as far as when are we going to be able to be there legally? I mean, is it 24 hours? Is it close at 10? I think we got to look at those things so that we're not setting somebody up for failure. And maybe think about placement when it comes to somebody who might want to stay open later. They're maybe not on that end of that commercial, but more closer towards the square, just from a sound situation. So just think.
I don't totally disagree with the vice mayor as far as having some creative idea as far as helping businesses, but my recollection is the discussion for having commercial space was something to help defray some of the expenses, so we can't forget that either. So Alderman Pond.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back. I think Alderman Blanton just hit on something huge, which is noise pollution in that area. I think that it's so close to residential, even if it meant that we had to go back and revisit our amplification ordinance and make sure that we're protecting that portion of town right there, make it acoustic only, for example. I think that there's some opportunity, so I think that's a great point.
I've got Alderman Barnhill, and then I've got Alderman Berger.
Yeah,
again.
I'm sitting here and listening. I certainly don't think Seaside and Franklin are compatible. They may have been compatible in some of their planning, and the fact that Seaside wanted to develop and wanted to do the things that they did. I would be concerned if we were subsidizing that restaurant or whatever on that end, and we're not subsidizing the other businesses on the other 16 blocks. I'm not sure how that's going to work. Well, not works, it doesn't work, but I would be real concerned about something like that. I mean, if the business comes in, it should be a business that we all agree on and something we want to see, but it should be something that is pretty well confident is self-supporting for a certain length of time then. But I would be I'd be concerned about subsidizing a new business, and we've got what we've got. And I'm sure that some of them are probably struggling some now to make ends meet, to do whatever they need to do to stay in business. So, I don't want to compete. I don't want that to compete against somebody else that we're not subsidizing.
Alderman Berger, quick comment.
I would just
before
say,
we move
real
on.
quick, number one, park hours, I don't know if we could even regulate that. You go across the street, the church has a little park, unless you gate it, because you go across the street and you got that little park at the church, people can sit on that bench all night long if they want, to come and go. And if they're walking down the street and they want to sit and talk to somebody, I see people out there at 9, 10 o'clock at night sitting and talking. So I don't know how we'd regulate that unless we absolutely rope it off or gate it off, and I don't want to do that, but that's just a thought. Two other things is restaurants stay open they don't have to be loud. You go over here to the restaurants over here on the corner, down by the bakehouse, you don't hear a peep out of them. I mean, there's no noise, and so we're not going to look at something that's going to have music. And I think the word subsidizing could be loosely used, but I think if we did something, we could definitely put a timeline on it, like 2 years, and then their rate is raised. And I think it's a city hall building, so I think we have that option to do that. I wouldn't feel that we would have to do that for everybody downtown because we don't own those buildings. Those are not ours. And then I think we could possibly work with the Entrepreneur Center because they're always working to help people establish their businesses, and they've got their center right down the road. So we might look at talking to the chamber about that.
Oh, very quickly, Mayor, thank you. I think I've just demonstrated why my initial comment was what it was, which is I think we need to get a committee with the chamber and others that come up with ideas, because we will spend a countless number of hours sitting up here talking about what we could do and what should do, and I think we need to get into Alderman Barnhill's point. I don't want us to subsidize, but there are our Williamson County Chamber that is within their mission to do that, and we would have. But again, we can't. It's not our job to come up with the solution, but giving the direction of what we want, which is what you've heard, and then bringing us back options with private partners too, so that we wouldn't be subsidizing. We would be the nonprofit in our community that supports small business would be maybe the tenant for that, and they are in their mission and their fundraising. They are the subsidizer. We're getting rent, so we can sit up here all day long and talk about all of our ideas, but that was why I brought it up, is we need to have a committee or the staff needs to run with that one. Thank you. Appreciate
Not to
everyone's
belabor
feedback.
the point, but, with a professional person that leases the space, he's going to have creative tools that he uses normally. So we'll depend on that. How about item 4, which is ordinance 2024-30 to establish an updated occupational safety and health program plan, devise rules, provide for a safety director, and the implementation of such a program plan.
This is on both of your agendas. It is an update of our occupational safety program. We are required to have this submitted to the Tennessee Occupational Health Administration. So this just provides for that and provides for a fairly administrative related type of update. And we want to get that in. We're required to do an update periodically, and this would meet that requirement.
And contract number 2024-0329, license agreement between Williamson County, Tennessee, City of Franklin, Tennessee for periodic scheduled use of the county's auditorium.
So as we continue to work on our solution for what our interim city hall and city functions look like as we build a new city hall on this site, we have worked through an arrangement at no cost to use the county administration complex and where the county commission meets and school board meets for board of mayor and alderman meetings and for planning commission meetings throughout the construction period. So just wanted to share that with you. I really have the authority as city administrator to execute it, so I'm glad to do that, but I did want to draw it to your attention. We have a good solution for those. We will likely do smaller committee meetings in other locations. It's just a little more convenient, like Eastern Flank. We've got that wired for broadcast, et cetera, already, and some other spaces that we may be able to use, like the community room or things like that, are also potential options for smaller committee meetings that are still publicly accessible as well. So
Will we
glad
change
we have that moving forward.
our time frame or days or anything?
You would have all the same meeting schedule. It fits perfectly with what the county needs or already has established. So it's great in terms of planning commission and BOMA.
Okay, City
But
of
just,
Franklin.
excuse me, if I
I'm
could just
sorry,
say,
Alderman
so what
Peterson.
about even like a budget committee meeting though?
Those would probably be at Eastern Flank.
Oh, okay.
Just a little easier. It's a smaller meeting, open to the public. It'll just be a little easier for us to administer than going into the county space on more dates.
Okay, City of Franklin contract 2024-0098 with Thompson Energy Solutions for preventive maintenance for 27 generators for a term of 3 years. Any questions about that one? Okay, we'll keep rolling on and go to item 7, which is discussion of the zoning ordinance standards regarding the display of flags and standard enforcement process, followed by the Building and Neighborhood Services. Mr. Marsh is coming up along with Dylan.
All right, this had come up at your previous meeting, and we wanted to follow up with some additional context in terms of what's on the books related to the existing zoning ordinance, how we got there. We talked about how it dates back to the, I think, 1991 zoning ordinance and elements of it even before that. So give you that context. Our management fellow, Dylan Gaster, did some research tracking down what some other communities do and how have they approached this issue, and just gives you some broader context and background related to what we do, how it relates to what some other communities do, and we're glad to take any questions from there and any guidance you want to provide us as we look at this. So take it away, Tom.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to come and talk to you about this a little bit. As Eric said, with the recent discussion about flags, we wanted to provide you a little bit of context of the how and why we got to where we are. And then as there were some discussions about, well, what other jurisdictions do, we'll touch on that a little bit also. So first of all, with the basis for flags being covered by our sign regulations, as you know, flags are intended to convey messages or to convey information. And that's essentially part of the definition of flags in our zoning ordinance, is a device used to convey a message or to convey information. So flags fell into that category. And as we get into some of the discussion of the history, you'll see kind of where that came into play. And as you know, the city has authority to regulate the size, location, timing, materials of signs, but not the message. Our current zoning ordinance regulates the quantity, location, size, height, and materials of flags. So a little bit of how we got here with the flag regulation history. I've got a draft of our zoning ordinance from August 1988 provided for you here. And it just goes to show you the maximum number stated there was 3. And also, as you read through that definition, you see that they were actually talking about some of the possible content of flags also, in terms of official seals for emblems of companies or corporations. Talked about design of government, educational institution, fraternal organizations, and so on. So that goes back to some really descriptive information about what the content of the flags is, what we were talking about in 1988, but still the limit of 3. So then we progressed to what actually got adopted. This was the zoning ordinance as of August 11th, 1992. And you see now flags are actually in the prohibited category, not allowed. Wind-blown devices such as flags are prohibited, except in connection with grand openings. So there, it wasn't talking about content, they were just prohibited. So then we go on to October of 2005. And so I think, so between 1992 and 2005, there was a realization that, wait a minute, we're prohibiting all flags. That's not what the intent was. So then we went back to, now you see that signs are allowed in all zoning districts, and we talk about freestanding flags. But there again, we still had the limit on the number, the limit on a description, a definition of what the sign area that would be allowed, a height of the pole, and so on. So this was, the actual change was prior to 2005, but I didn't get into following the total change of step by step through the years. I just want to give you a snapshot of October 10th, 2005, this was what the statement was. And then we fast forward to our current zoning ordinance that became effective July the 1st, 2024. You see the actual regulation is perhaps exactly the same, word for word, just a different format. The quantity, a maximum of 3 per lot, the sign area relative to the height of a pole, the placement at the property line, and then a regulation on the pole height. And next, I'm going to, like I said, Dylan did some research for you on what some other jurisdictions are doing, and I'll turn that over to him.
All right. So in your agenda packets, you should have the list of 12 different jurisdictions and their exact wording in their zoning ordinance on how they regulate flags and temporary signs, which are sometimes the category used for flags. So on the screens, we'll have a broad summary of those, but if you're looking for the exact language and the nuts and bolts of it, it'll be there in your packets. So the terminology used kind of defines some broad categories for flag classification. So those are official or unofficial, referring to government flags, or explicitly stated organizations whose flags are approved in a city. There's also commercial and non-commercial flags, which are used for advertising purposes or not. And then the most common terminology about flags in these ordinances was permanent and temporary. So many of them distinguish between the two. So the city of Brentwood actually uses an flagpole per acre, talking about permanent flagpoles, and any property under 3 acres is only allowed 1, and over 3 acres you're allowed 1 flag per acre. Murfreesboro goes into detail on permanent and temporary flags. So you're allowed 3 permanent per lot and 1 temporary per lot. In Germantown, Tennessee, they consider national flags to be exempt from their sign standards, but in the wording and interpretation, you could see in their ordinance that they consider the flags as banners, and then those must fit into temporary and permanent banner rules in their ordinance. Then we have Hoover, Alabama, who prohibits unofficial flags. And that's also a maximum of 3 official flags that are allowed. Similarly, in McKinney, Texas, they also only allow 3 flags, and they have to be government in nature.
Can you explain what unofficial flags mean here?
Yes. So unofficial flags, usually somewhere further up in the zoning ordinance, they say the official flags that are recognized and able to fly. So it could be government, religious, or other official organization, and not considering personal expression unless it's for a support of an organization that's recognized in their ordinance.
So those would be official.
So official is recognized in the ordinance, and then it just kind of lumps it into 2 broad categories. So unofficial would be anything not specified in their ordinance. In Carmel, Indiana, they exempt flags as well from their sign standards, provided that they meet the size requirements. So there's no limit there. Cary, North Carolina.
Excuse me.
Yes, sorry.
Before, on Carmel, Indiana, could you give us more detail on 3rd bullet point, height restrictions in place for, or excuse me, number 2, flagpoles must follow setback requirements?
Yes, so that's the distance from the property line, how far they must be set back. So they don't restrict the number, it's just that distance of where you can actually put up a flagpole, and how tall the flagpole can be is what they go into detail on, but they did not specify on the exact number.
Okay, thank you.
So Cary, North Carolina, and Alpharetta, Georgia have similar ordinances where they allow for 3 flagpoles and 2 flags per pole. So this is only referring to permanent flags. So in these ordinances, you can have a total of 6 flags, but the size restrictions apply. And also, Chattanooga, Tennessee allows a total of 4 flags. And that is 1 federal, 1 state, and 1 local flag, and then 1 additional flag. So they're looking at the content on those flags and require that they all must be on a flagpole, so they would be permanent flags. Then in Columbia, Tennessee, they exclude official flags, but allow temporary signs. So a lot of these ordinances, if they specified flags, that's what we had recorded in your packets. But if they didn't specify exactly on flags, then a lot of times it would fall under the banners and the temporary signs category. And so they had the number of 2 restriction. And also going back to Germantown and their classification of temporary signs, they had for temporary signs 1 per street front per subject matter allowed. In Huntsville, Alabama, they measure the total square feet of sign area. And so there's 40 allowed, and then for a single sign, that would be 20 square feet of sign area allowed per property. And finally, Greenville, South Carolina, they set the maximum number at 3, but allow 2 temporary signs per property, and all these must follow the size standards.
Stepping away from the specific sign topic for a minute, while I have your attention, I wanted to touch on our basic enforcement process. And the comments you heard over the last few weeks, I mean, there were some statements that don't necessarily follow along our typical enforcement process. And I'm sure you've all heard this before, but sometimes, you might, as our standard procedure, might get washed out in some of the other things you hear. But I just wanted to touch on the fact that our approach always is to educate first and then enforce. We prefer the education route. And our first contact with a potential property maintenance or zoning violation, our first contact is almost always just communication. We're trying to have a conversation. Because as you've heard, and we realize that most people that we're dealing with don't realize they have some type of code violation on their property. So our first contact is almost always just a conversation, trying to get them on the phone, trying to get an email point of contact, knocking on the door, trying to have a conversation. Explain what the violation might be, provide a reasonable amount of time to make corrections to the property. If the correction is not made, then the next step is a formal written notice of violation that is an actual formal document. But again, it explains there's a violation and provides a reasonable amount of time to correct the violation, depending on the nature of the violation and what all is involved in correcting that violation. Could be as little as 10 days. With some of the things we've seen in the last couple of years, it could be 60 days, could be longer, because we know that some things take time to correct. And then finally, if the responsible party does not take corrective action, then we issue a citation to municipal court. So that's the third step in the process that we're talking about here. When one of our staff members is speaking to someone for the first time, they're not handing someone a citation to court the first time they speak to them. It's been a period of time of communication and explanation where they issue a citation. And then after the citation is issued, there's still time to make corrections to the property, whatever it is, before they go to court. And again, staff does not assess fines. That is a determination made by the judge in the municipal court. It's not a set, you're going to be fined this amount of money. That's not a statement. As you see in the presentation, the judge may assess a fines that are a maximum of $50 per day per offense. And again, even if the judge, our staff has to go into court and prove the case, prove that there's a violation, to convince the judge that there is a violation on the property. And then the judge will determine whether or not to assess a fine. And then the judge may determine still to give more time to correct the violation, depending on their perception of the situation and any factors that are involved. So it's a little bit off topic of flags particularly, but I know in some of the comments that you've heard, you may have gotten some misdirection in terms of how we typically handle that's across the board, yes ma'am. Wanted to share with you a little bit how our standard procedure with dealing with the enforcement process. And Bill, did you want to go ahead and proactively say anything, or do you want to just respond?
Sure. I know this is a slightly complex issue. Anytime you're talking about First Amendment issues, it's immediately kind of complex. You heard earlier the statement, flags are treated like signs. I wanted to expand on that a little bit, give you kind of the framework that you're looking at. Regulation of speech, First Amendment speech, must be content neutral for you all, and I think you've heard that before. The one thing I want to point out to you as you have this kind of discussion, and we've looked at these other ordinances, is that includes not disfavoring any kind of speech. We don't like that kind of flag. It also includes not favoring any kind of speech, right? So we do like that kind of flag. They go part and parcel. You really, to be clean, you really should do neither, right? Content neutral means it just should make no reference to the content on the sign at all. really where you are with that is time, place, and manner. You can regulate speech if it's content neutral, time, place, and manner. That is what you really see here and what you have been doing before. That's the size of the flag. That's how many there can be. That's what material it might be, et cetera, et cetera. And some of these other things you see in other cities' ordinances, the same kind of deal. Must be set back X amount. That's content neutral, right? That's time, place, and manner. That being said, you also have to have a substantial interest, a substantial governmental interest to regulate at all, or significant, depending. And you do, right? So in your zoning ordinance, all of the reasons that you have a zoning ordinance, those are recognized as substantial governmental interests or significant governmental interests. Things like safety, aesthetics, orderly maintenance of property, all of those kinds of things are recognized as reasons to regulate. Really where you are, what you have in place now, I don't see any particular issue with the law. The issue that you're seeing, I think, is just the number of flags, the 3. There's no real magical number that 3 is good, 4 is better, 2 is, et cetera. What the law really says about that is that if you're going to regulate speech, even when it's content neutral, as long as you leave open ample channels of alternative communication, you could communicate this somewhere else, and you do not unreasonably restrict speech, then you're probably in the clear, right? That's what the case law says. It doesn't make distinctions necessarily about American flags per se. There are some flag burning cases where the Supreme Court really talks about that in the 80s and 90s, right? When that issue was kind of blurring around, gave them the occasion to really talk about the American flag in particular. One of the things the Supreme Court has pointed out is that flags aren't always speech, but most of the time they are. So it's going to be hard to find a situation where a flag isn't some kind of protected speech, and that is true for the American flag as well. So time, place, and manner is where you are. Content neutral is where you are.
Vice Mayor, and I'm going to call up the people who want to speak.
I got you. So, so then for the cities though that have official flags who do designate or government flags, like my neighborhood, I'll tell you, I'm allowed 1 flag and it can only be the American flag. So if I want to fly the Buckeye flag, it better be in my living room. So how is that is it really not appropriate or not allowed, but we just accept it because it's the American flag? I'm kind of curious because it seems like in conflict to what you're saying is there are people who do allow or do designate a government flag.
Well, I'm reminded of a lawyer that I worked with who taught me the phrase, I'm not ashamed to say my client follows the law. I can't give those other entities legal advice, but I would tell them the same thing I'm telling you, which is you can't favor or disfavor any of those.
Yeah, well,
now, I will tell you.
There was a U.S. Congress passed a law that allowed HOAs there was a law passed in 2005. So that's why HOAs can
There
do
is
that.
an HOA
There's an
yeah.
HOA flag.
overlay to some of this too.
Yeah, working with your HOA is very different than what you all are talking about doing. So it's kind of hard to even mix and match.
Yep.
I will tell you, though, if I could have just a second, one of the things the flag burning cases really talked about with that, because the way those cases came about, if you recall this, some folks were having kind of demonstrations and they'd burn the American flag and the news would really focus on it. And it was kind of a hot-blooded issue at the time. Those cases went to the U.S. Supreme Court, and what the Supreme Court said is, you really can't favor this. This is still speech for that individual, even though it is that flag, if that makes any sense. What was happening is cities and counties and local jurisdictions were passing Protect the Flag Acts, Protect the Flag ordinances, and that's what would get challenged, right? And those ordinances, those laws would say, you can't do X, Y, Z with this single flag. It was clearly a restriction of speech, is what the Supreme Court said, and you're really singling out the content in particular that you don't like. And they said, even in this context with this flag, that's really not a thing you can do. That's just not content neutral. So I know that's a lot to take in, but I just want to kind of put some framework in front of you as you think about a challenging issue.
I've got 4 residents that would like to speak. Kathleen Allen, Nancy Laxton, Joyce Mount, and Kimberly Mannion. I'm going to give 90 seconds. We've got a very tight schedule and a lot of things to still do, so 90 seconds, please. And if you'll go ahead and line up.
Here?
Yeah, yes, ma'am, that'll be perfect. Whoever's going to speak, go ahead and come to the microphone behind her, please.
And there's been a lot of misunderstandings.
You'll give your name, please.
Nancy Laxton, lot of misunderstanding, a lot of miscommunication. We were told this would be at 5, so a lot of people couldn't come. And I'm taking the place of some people that sent in before noon to the recorder's office. I never dreamed that I was going to be standing up here telling you what they were going to tell you, but here I am. And I wanted to know if the board, hi everybody, if you all were familiar with this petition that went out. It's all in the recorder's office, and the ladies that put this together were Kimberly Mannion and Kathleen Allen, and it has nothing to do with amendment, but repeal. And that has nothing to do with signs and repealing the flags of every kind. We're talking about one flag here. This is our symbol. This is our country. This is what our patriotism shows us. I've heard what the gentlemen were saying here. They're legal authorities. I'm not. But I do know I started collecting some statistics about what was going on with the Supreme Court. And just like some of them have said, some of it's vague. Some of it, they're burning the flags. Nobody gets a penalty, no problem. Here we have the Supreme Court has already ruled. This had to do, I don't know how you feel about Trump. It's not the problem here. But some people took to court about having a bunch of Trump signs in their yard, and the police gave them a citation about removing them. So they went to court, and the Supreme Court ruled on the limits based on that this content is unconstitutional. It says it's determined in previous cases that arbitrary bans on political signs and others are not constitutional, and that's what they're talking about.
If you'll wind up, please.
I'm trying. All of this, and you won't have but 2 of us, because the other 3 couldn't make it. Kimberly Mannion and Kathleen Allen. She's in Florida helping with the hurricane problem down there. The things that they showed, like Memphis, that isn't even, this so vague. I used to live in Memphis. I know what that ordinance was. That's so vague, it really didn't have anything to do with this. So here's your petition. There's pages and pages.
Yes, ma'am. If you'll
21
wind up,
pages.
please.
Yes, sir. I'm just trying to tell you, there's 21 pages of people that live around in the Franklin area that are petitioning that this be taken down. The heat is not about skinhead flags or Nazi flags or any of that. The people are passionate about this.
Yes, ma'am. If you'll
And
wind up, if you'll go ahead and please, I
we've
need
got
to get on to the
comments.
next person,
I don't
please.
know why I can't make just a suggestion on some of the comments that have come out.
I gave her 90 seconds. I've already given her probably another minute.
But
Mr. McNabb, point of order, please. Mr. Mayor, please. Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Alderman Berger.
Thank you. Since she is speaking for some other people, could you possibly give her
It's your
another minute?
request, yes.
Another minute?
thank you. I just want to let you know that this, if you want it, I can't give it to you. She requested that you all have it available at the recorder's office. And it is several hundred, well over 300 petitioners that signed on this. And then I had a whole list of comments. But I just want to tell you, people are not passionate about other things that I know of. They're passionate about this. That's the only thing that I know. And we as a people, we have to be represented by you. You have to be able to give us the things that we want as a people, or we're not functioning in a constitutional republic. We're in a democracy where mob rules. And either way you look at it, right now, we're talking about the American flag should not be limited. I'm not going to go through all these comments, but believe me, they're hot and passionate. They also, at the recorder's office, if you want to get a copy. And I come from a family, both my brother and my father retired colonels in the Air Force. They both fought in the Vietnam War, the Korean War, and the Second World War. And my family has put up flags, especially on the 4th of July, but we had flags all over the place. I don't even have a flag up now. It's never been a problem here. All of a sudden, it's a big problem, and I know of 2 people. That's how I found out about it, on Nextdoor. Nextdoor had over 500 replies to this issue. And if anybody's on Nextdoor, they can go and look at all of them. 500 replies. Longest chain on Nextdoor I've ever seen. So you're going to have people that...
Thank you, Ms. Laxton.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Joyce. I'm sorry.
Okay, good evening, Alderman, Alderwomen,
You'll speak into the microphone, please, Joyce.
and Mr. Mayor. Wait, can you hear me? No, must not be on.
It's on. You just need to speak a little louder.
Now, can you hear me? Okay, so good evening, and I'm Joyce Mount. I'm a senior citizen and a Gold Star mom. I live just up the street, West Main Street in Franklin. Both my parents are born and raised here. However, I was raised in the United States Air Force. My daddy served in World War II and the Korean War. All my life, the American flag represents the United States of America in so many ways, especially our freedom. My fallen son, Warrant Officer Judson E. Mount, an Army officer, was hit by an IED in 2009 in Iraq in a war, and he died. As a Gold Star mom, our mission is to never let our child be forgotten, number one, and to help the veterans. I live that daily. Recently, in finding out of the Ordinance 15.9 in 1991, which I've now seen, you've done more since then, so that it was just enforced, I was appalled. Residents, people like myself, can't be patriotic and show their support for Americans and America. I get it that it may open doors for others wanting to display yellow flags, black flags, whatever flags, more than 3. Let 3 be the limit for non-American flags, but put a larger number limit on American flags. Discrimination? Not American flags. This is America. I see him looking away, so I know he's thinking that's very discriminated. But anyway, remember we live in America, land of the free, because of the brave. If we were in World War III, could we not fly more American flags? Could we have yellow ribbons around more than 3 trees? Watch out for your future in your ordinance. My question to you, I would appreciate being addressed, is, are you telling me, this Gold Star mom, that Memorial Day and Veterans Day, etc., as I always have, I cannot fly American flags down the sides of my sidewalk in honor of my son, my hero? Thank you.
Alderman Baggett, you want to comment? Sure.
I will. Thank you, and that was very moving, and I did ask for this to be brought back to a future meeting and understand the bounds we work in. I'm very intrigued by the information and that you presented here regarding the different cities, and with the utmost respect to staff who've given their opinion on what we can do. It does seem like there are other cities out there who have taken steps to say that official flags, there is no limit. And so I don't think it's absurd for us to consider that as well. I think that's what I desire. This has all come up because of a couple of circumstances that I know to be innocent in nature. In fact, geared towards holidays and patriotic holidays, for which the Gold Star mom spoke. Some great examples. I've come up in my head with a lot of different examples in which the spontaneous expression that one might want to have in their yard with regards to temporary signs, we should have some allowance for. Specifically with the American flag, I do think we need to look into this further, and I would support this kind of language that I've seen in Germantown, Hoover, and Columbia for that reason. I have no problem with it. I don't think most people are going to put up more than 3 flags. Like, I just don't. Like, this is not a normal problem. But I think this brings up a good point. And look, if we were the only, if every other city in America had similar ordinances and they hadn't had some ordinance to allow for this kind of thing, you know, maybe I would feel it. But we have other examples of this, and so it's hard for me to accept that we can't do it. Now, granted, you're not giving all these other cities legal advice, and you're giving us legal advice. But I would support that, moving in that direction personally for the American flag, and I think the community would support that as well. I am not in support of removing all of our ordinances, which some folks in that petition were advocating for. I think that's throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's there for a good reason, and it is non-content restrictive as it is written now. But I do think that there are enough examples for me with respectable other cities. This isn't, you know, Eastern Egypt, Alabama, you know, that has this ordinance allowing for as many. These are reputable cities within our state even that are doing this. And so I think we should look into that further.
If I may, Mayor, real quick. Before the discussion goes too much further, I just want to be clear about something. I'm not anti-flag, and I'm not telling you can't do a thing, but I am tasked with telling you what the law says. That being said, I don't want everyone to misunderstand. I'm not giving you a recommendation. I merely gave you the framework and what the law says. So to anybody who's hearing this or seeing this, I'm not pointing out a restriction of any kind to try and tell you you can't do a thing or these other people are acting unlawfully. None of that. Agreed. I want you, for whatever decision you make, to understand what the law says, if that makes any sense. I just want to make sure that was clear before the discussion goes forward and everyone thinks I hate the American flag. That is certainly not the case.
I never once thought that.
I understand.
I know that.
I just want to make sure that is said.
Could I ask Bill to kind of weigh in on this? One of the things I've thought about related to this is some of this really ties to a temporary or holiday display type of thing, at least in the specific case we're talking about. What if, for the purposes of a temporary display, the flag counting of a permanent, whether it's 3 or 4, whatever number we think is right, you differentiate that? If it's incorporated with a temporary display or holiday display of some nature, for those purposes, you're not counting towards a flag total because it's intentionally meant to be a shorter term. It's around a 4th of July or whatever, Christmas, Thanksgiving, Memorial Day, Labor. Yeah, they're all the different things people decorate for. Some are patriotic, some are just general, could be religious, whatever it might be. That flags, if they're part of a broader temporary display, you could sort of exclude that from the count of flags as it's defined in the zoning ordinance. From a legal perspective, how would you approach that? Is that someplace that might be an option for the board to consider as well?
Yeah, so you really, content neutral is kind of where you start. I will say that the case law doesn't get into the nitty gritty of that kind of question, right? It expects the government to act reasonably, in good faith, those kinds of things. It is certainly the case that flags of various kinds are hung as decor for holidays, right? So you might have the Day of the Dead and the Dios de los Muertos. You've got those flags and banners hanging everywhere. The law kind of understands that you would reasonably interpret that to be something like holiday decor tied to that holiday. I think it's just, my view would be that it's kind of hard to tie the American flag itself to that. Now, I will say this issue has reared its head because one of the persons involved in this in the city has put up a really large Halloween display in their yard and also hung some American flags that have like pumpkins on them, right? So is that, and that's the question we have to address. Things like, is that an American flag or is that part of holiday decor? That's kind of how the law would view it. But again, you really are starting with content neutral. Anytime you start with, can we do this flag a certain kind of way? It's something other than decor. You're already in kind of rough territory in the law, right? That's where those Protect the Flag Acts came from when the flags were being burnt, was that same kind of idea. Can we treat this flag differently than others?
If the flag wasn't handed to that lady at her son's funeral, it's not an American flag. That's pretty simple. If it has a, I can answer that question for you. If it's American flag with a pumpkin, it's not an American flag.
Well, right, but let me stop you
It's
for a
very
second.
simple. If she received that on her son's funeral, let's put that in the ordinance. That's
let me-
the
let me-
American flag.
Let me offer a piece of clarification. There is actually a definition of what the American flag is. It's in the Code of Federal Regulations. I want to say it's 4 CFR something.
Yep.
But it points to the actual drawing in one of the old CFR regulation books when they were released and says that's the American flag we recognize, right? So if you want to define it, it's actually already defined in the federal regs. In terms of what you just said, though, Alderman Baggett, I want to tell you that you started with all of the content on the flag, right? And so I don't disagree with anything you've said, but that we need to recognize that's what we're doing when we do
What
that.
do you mean I started with the content?
If it had this on it, if it had that on it, if it had this on it, you were reading the flag, looking at everything on it to make a determination, is what you just described loosely. Not accusing you of wrongdoing. I'm just pointing out that was the nature of the conversation.
I described the flag
With a pumpkin on it.
with the pumpkin on it. Yeah, yeah.
You said those aren't okay.
I actually described the American flag, which is inversely what you. I mean, I said what it was not, but by saying what it was. So I was not describing what a flag was. I'm yes, what you just said is the description, but I did not describe what I was describing the standard, which was the flag that she received is the American flag, and therefore, if it has a pumpkin on it, then that's not the American flag. I was not describing anything else on it.
Oh, on the flag.
Does that make? I wasn't.
I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I want to. What I'm kind of pointing out is that
I'm not in
even
content. The only content I'm in is that is the American flag.
the
And
other
everything
flag,
else, anything else is
the
not.
other flag, you're in that content, and I'm only saying that not to chastise you and not to be
Understand.
unkind.
So why
It's
are these other
easy
cities
with-
able to do this and we're not?
It's easy with good,
Why are these other
well-intentioned.
cities- we need to get to the bottom of it. Why can't we do that, what you described, and this?
It's
what the other
easy
cities
with,
do?
with good intentions to inadvertently kind of end up there and start talking about what's on a flag as you regulate speech and flags and signs. That's kind of all I'm pointing out. What those other cities do, I can't speak to. I understand your question.
So Bill, back to the question. Could we determine flags, any flags, as part of a temporary display, therefore not part of the count that is in the zoning ordinance around
Temporary.
a permanent flag, a flag that is there on a pole that is there throughout? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Can we differentiate it and say that's part of a display, a seasonal or a temporary display? Could we do that, include flags in that definition?
I think as-
Regardless of what they are?
Yeah, I think as long as you're careful about what you're defining, right? As long as it's neutral and it's a time, place, manner, the description of the flag, how it's portrayed, how long it's up, those kinds of things, I think that's okay. I think that's going to be a little tricky though, because you've also right now got the 3 per lot limit already in place. So if you're adding that, you'd have to be careful about how you define what you're talking about. If it's content neutral, though, I think you're in a good place to start.
Before my head explodes.
It's a
Trying to
lot.
keep-
It's a lot.
Okay, so what you were describing, Patrick, you know, if you got a pumpkin on a flag, you got a skull and a crossbones, you got, you know, howdy doody, anybody on the flag, that doesn't become the American flag. That they've desecrated the flag, they've done something to it. So I don't think we're talking about that. But I would support. I definitely need more work on this, but I'm leaning to the fact that maybe we don't regulate how many American flags or state of Tennessee flags, but you regulate, like the other ones, 3 flags are a limit of any other kind of flag, because this is our country, this is our patriotism, this is our country, this is our state. It's a huge difference than, a flower flag to say, hey, it's spring or whatever. So I think that's what the people are saying, and I hear them loud and clear. You're saying we shouldn't regulate the American flag, and I think even the Tennessee flag. But other flags, yeah, sure. You understand why you want to do that. I don't want somebody to have to apply for a permit to say, my son, my daughter, my husband, my mother, my spouse is coming home from the service, and we're going to line our whole front yard and our street with the neighbors of American flags. You're going to have 50 flags, 100 flags out there, and somebody's coming home, and you want to do that. That should be a no-brainer. We should allow that to happen. I remember in a place where I lived that people were doing that, and those flags stayed up for a good month after they came home, and they had no problem with it. So I think we're looking at some things that we have to talk about. We talk about, if you want to talk about these decorations, and you talk about flags that are, seasonal or holiday flags, those things are so different than I think what we're getting away from the subject matter these people have brought us. And it's all about the American flag, and I'm throwing in the Tennessee flag to go with it. And I think maybe that's where we don't limit.
I do want to clarify, our enforcement has never been about the American flag. It's been about the total number of flags. It's not.
Yeah.
I just want to be clear.
Yes,
Okay.
you're absolutely clear of
Thank
that, and thanks for saying that, because we weren't, wasn't anything to do with it. These people up here,
It's
we're all
counting
patriots,
flags.
and we're
Yeah.
not about the flags. So
On the Caesar, I'm going to give you a chance.
Thank you, Mayor. Tom, thank you, and Dylan, for presenting some information, some feedback. And Tom, also thank you for wearing a St. Jude flag tie today.
Lots of flags on it.
Which St. Jude is near and dear to my heart, as is the American flag. I may be alone in this, and I'm not suggesting that I am, but I fly an American flag at my house every single day. I fly one. I fly a different flag in my backyard because my daughter's in college at a school that I want people to know about, especially my neighbor behind me that's an Auburn fan. And so I think 3 flags is a sufficient number. I worry about us suggesting that we can't fly our national rag and show of support to the people that are fighting and often dying for our freedom to have this discussion in an open and honest way. I do want to bring up a question, though, because I mentioned your tie. Talk to us, Bill, about the likelihood that if we cordon off the American flag as a special and specific instrument to display national pride, what are the repercussions potentially for that? Because I'm worried about us saying we can only fly the American flag and someone showing up with a very winnable lawsuit within a few weeks, and they want to show one of the flags from Tom's tie that maybe aren't the American flag. Because as much as I have pride for America, I worry that my neighbor may not be an American lover and may put 30 flags of a different country and may win that battle. So help us understand that piece, because it's a as an American, I want my American flag in my yard. But as an American, I also know that the Supreme Court's made decisions that says the person next to me may choose not to put 30 American flags in their yard. They may choose to put 30 of a different flag in their yard. And I don't want us to blindly walk into this thinking we can open it up for just the American flag only to be put in a compromising position.
really,
I want.
this is America.
It is absolutely America, and I want our legal counsel to provide me the information and guidance on this. I'm not suggesting, wait, Mr. Mayor, I'm not suggesting I don't want American flags here at all.
I know that.
I want to understand the legal ramifications if we choose to open this up to just the American flag.
And to be clear, I'm going to take it away from the American flag for a minute because I don't want to get tarred and feathered and run out of here for anything that I say about the law. If you choose any flag to single out for special treatment, that's what the cases are talking about. That is favoring a kind of speech over another kind of speech. You landed on exactly the issue. Is it a thorny issue? Absolutely it is. Absolutely it is.
Thorny
Does
issue
it-
that 3 other municipalities who have had an ordinance in place for X number of years and who clearly, I guess, this hasn't happened.
Alderman Baggett,
So we're living
I was
kind of
asked about the
in whatever land.
possibilities.
I understand. That's not directed towards you. It's
Right.
kind of directed towards the board. We're living kind of in what if
I'd
land.
like for us to move, you know, we're not gonna solve the problem tonight. And there's been a couple of requests to bring it back again, and maybe Bill perhaps work on that a little bit more and give us a little more information. We need to move on.
So Mayor, you're suggesting
we
we
can do that.
wave the white flag tonight?
And maybe we can email you.
What's left on the agenda, I can raise a white flag, red flag.
And Ken, I had asked if I can kind of complete my thoughts, if I
go
could. I just want to be really clear. This is not an statement, and some people started to make comments that suggested that maybe that was not my position. I'm pro-American flag. I just think it's important for us to understand potentially what some of the limitations are if we make this decision. So Ken, I appreciate, perhaps Bill, if you can make that a part of your continuing discussion.
And I just want to reiterate something. I understood what you said. I knew you weren't doing that. But we live in America, and I think it's under our purview without legal threat to say we are not limiting our country's flag, but all these other flags, for everything else, I think we have the authority to do that. And I don't think we'd find ourselves at the Supreme Court at that. Anyway, thanks.
Barrier installation on State Route 96 Murfreesboro Road between Royal Oaks and Interstate 65.
Mr. Mayor, I'll just say this about actually both item number 8 and number 9. They are on both meetings, and our purpose for having them on your work session is to frame how we've put them on the voting session. It's not to have, you're going to have a public hearing, especially on item 9, but you're going to have time to deliberate at the 7 o'clock meeting, but wanted to give you a little bit of context to maybe help frame that decision when it gets to 7 o'clock. So specifically with this situation, the board had asked us to defer any installation while we worked on some implementation that might help local businesses in particular impacted by putting the median barrier in place, temporary, or it's written as a temporary. So we've been working on that. There are some additional work that's going to be required in terms of adjusting how the signals work to accommodate U-turn to get in there, that sort of thing. And so I think the question before you tonight is similar to the question you had a few weeks ago is, do you want to implement the improvement, the safety improvement, knowing we're continuing to work on the other issue, or do you want the other issue resolved and before you implement the safety improvement? So that's really the gist of it. We're informing you that there's a little more to it in terms of what we need to do from an engineering and signalization, signal configuration standpoint that will take a little more time, a little more money. But that context I thought was important and wanted to try to make that a little more efficient when we get to 7 o'clock. But Paul, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, so I'll just add that, you know, I'm not going to go through the whole safety data again, but if you have questions, Adam's here, and I'm here to try to address those as best we can. The options before you were essentially a temporary barrier and essentially down that yellow line, a concrete median, which the cost associated with that is very minimal. We can install that. TDOT would provide us the materials, and we would do the installation ourselves. The other option was a concrete median. The estimated cost of that was around $400,000. And what I had heard y'all say was you wanted us to continue to work with the property owners. We started to look at it, trying to come up with a plan, and realized it's a little bit more complicated than we thought. And so we're going to have to engage a consultant to pay about $20,000 to $30,000 to look at how we accommodate U-turns. And really the reason being, I'm going to put this in presentation mode, is with this southbound ramp on I-65 is we have to be very cautious about allowing a U-turn right there because people tend to go down the wrong ramp, get into head-on accidents. We have to separate that. You're starting to talk about doing signal modifications to accommodate these business owners, and that starts to take the price tag up to about $800,000, $900,000 with a concrete median. We're talking about a pretty big capital project at that point. I'm not sure personally that it's worth it because of all the safety issues there, but if that's something you want us to continue to explore, we're happy to do so. We have not engaged with the property owner because that plan's not complete and we need to go through a study process. But we did they were notified that it's on this agenda, and our legal counsel informed the attorney that's representing these property owners that this is on before you tonight. And so I'll generally leave it there and happy to answer any questions
Can you
that you
explain
have.
where the U-turns are?
And our other guidance was that if we do want to postpone, I think we said to the December meeting.
December meeting,
Is what
yes,
we
sir.
would suggest if you
Can
want to
explain
allow
where
that
the
time.
U-turns,
So if you can see my mouse here,
where you were talking about?
we would have to pull a
Is that at Royal Oaks
a
there?
U-turn. This is the southbound ramp on I-65. We would have to pull a U-turn
No.
East.
back farther. So yeah, north is this way, south is this way. This is the Twice Daily gas station right here.
So you're by the highway.
But about right where my
Oh, yeah, okay, you're getting off there.
right about where my mouse is where we would need to put the U-turn. And Adam can correct me if I'm wrong, but we would have to start restricting these right turn on reds coming southbound on 65 so that we could accommodate this U-turn. We would do so with a blank out sign that when we allow the U-turn, there would be a brief disruption in that southbound ramp, right turn on red. And I'm going to ask Adam to explain a little better.
Yeah, it's not as bad as you think. It's about a 15-second. Most of the time, it's only going to be about 2 cars that need to make a U-turn. So it's only about a 15-second green, yellow, red. So the blank outside would come on while that U-turn's going on, so that they wouldn't have a conflict, a right turn on red versus a U-turn. And then it would go off as soon as the U-turn went red. And there is a gap. Everyone's probably driven this. There's a gap when the northbound ramp goes green, no westbound traffic can move, and it's kind of like wasted green time for westbound traffic. So that's about when we would do the U-turn during that dead time, which is also when the right turn on red happens off the southbound ramp. So there would be like about a 15 to 16 second no turn on red.
I don't get that.
Bottom line is you think that there needs to be additional study before any decision is
Yeah.
made?
Yeah, we can
I've got all
do a
the-
concept plan, show you what it looks like.
Yeah.
You know,
If you're trying to accommodate U-turns, additional study would need to be done. If you're not,
not.
If
wanting
you don't want to do the
accommodate-
U-turns, that's an option as well.
That's what I want to know.
That's one of the solutions is the U-turn
That's my
piece.
question.
Yeah.
But I'll wait, he's up.
Alderman Potts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I have a question on Exhibit A. Exhibit A is what the state is willing to provide us at no cost. And my question is, and we don't have to have it, if you've got it tonight, great. If not, I'd like for it in the future, is to know what the cost is to remove that temporary, it looks like it's a small concrete median that's going to run down there. It's going to hold those temporary uprights. I'd like to know what the cost is on that, because if we did go to Exhibit A and then decide to move to a more permanent concrete median, that's an additional cost. Is that something the state's going to cover, or is that something now we're going to have to incur?
so that's a rubberized median. So you actually drill into the pavement and then you just undrill it to remove it. So so that keeps the bollards up.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's on the actual rubberized piece that you just drill into the pavement.
So we would absorb the cost, though?
To remove it? And
Yes.
to install it, and if we ever had to remove it, yes.
Okay. And
It's
then
just
the-
within our streets operation. We
It's
have the
within
capability.
operations.
Yeah.
And then the second question I had is, I'd like to see what I thought we were coming back with when you talked about that southbound off-ramp turning westbound, as you just demonstrated with your mouse, is not having U-turns at the tops of each of those ramps, but rather pushing it out to the next light and allowing for U-turns at the
Royal
next
Oaks.
lights.
Yeah, so we couldn't do it at Royal Oaks. We would do it at, what's that
It's a
side
little
street
bit
at?
further down. Right, well, that'd have to be modified, and there's a light there where that could be done. I'd just like to see us not have those U-turns at the tops of each of those ramps, north and southbound.
Correct. We agree with that.
Okay, thank you.
We can discuss more tonight at 7.
I just have one quick thing. I don't understand why we would have to put that U-turn there. I mean, people would have to go down further and turn around and come back if they want to. I don't think we need it there. I mean, it'd be nice to have it, but I don't think it's necessary. And the other thing is, I know these concrete barriers are more expensive and everything, but I've been in too many cities that have these, and the rubber basin chips away with all the traffic we have there, and it's all over the road. These things get real dirty, they look terrible, and within a few short months after winter time, and people run them over constantly, and they have to be replaced. And I know that's probably not expensive to replace, but I'm going on record, I am not voting ever for that. I want the concrete barrier. I'm willing to spend the money.
Yeah.
Peterson, do you want to say something?
Eventually, yes. I've taken down the white flag.
I'm sorry, okay. On one of these things, it says there's supposed to be something from Mr. Fidel or something like that. That's probably not his name. I was trying to go back to look to see if I could find that. Thank you. Okay, yeah, Zane Pinnell sent something, and it on my screen it has nothing on there. I mean, it's got a little thing with a little question mark on it.
That's simply an email from TDOT saying that they would provide the delineators and we could do the installation, is my assumption. It's doing the same thing on mine, and I'm not sure what the issue is. We'll have to look into that. Could be an issue with Civic Clerk.
And I think we had that last time this was on. It's just TDOT saying they'll pay for the dividers.
The other thing is, I guess, the question about the U-turns and everything is something that is really a big concern, I think. But then again, I mean, it's a real concern. But the other thing is, it looks to me, and I tried to drive out there today, but the traffic was so bad I couldn't go to any of the things that were on the, I guess, north side. None of them are connected to each other, is that right?
That is correct. As they redevelop, we are trying to get easements and cross-connectivity in place, but it takes redevelopment to do it. But that is being put into place as a rebuild.
But I don't, and for that, I think on the south side, you can probably go up on, gosh, I can't think of the road right now. Not
Riverside.
Riverside. You can go up it and kind of go, get into the back of some of those places on that side. But it's just on the, say, the north side.
Yep, there's room on both.
There's not any way to get, I couldn't even see exactly how to get to that hotel.
Yeah.
There,
I can tell you how to get to it.
There's actually room behind both of those,
Okay.
on both sides, the north and the south side, to actually put, we've talked about that, doing access roads behind those businesses. And I think we need to look into that some more, because we talked about it.
As they redevelop, we're trying to get it.
You mean that all of them would have to redevelop before you could get it?
Correct.
Alderman
It's all
Barnhill.
private.
Yeah, again, I guess beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and that's a temporary fix right there. And the more we put into it, the more complicated it becomes with no left turns here and no right turns here and recalibrating our traffic signals. I don't see anything wrong with that temporarily. And that's what this is a temporary fix to a safety problem that we have that keeps people from turning left into some of those businesses, either way, in either direction which they're going. I'm not going to, as much as Alderman Berger said she's not going to vote for that, I'm not going to vote to spend $300,000 or $400,000 when the state's furnishing us equipment, whatever, that will accomplish the same thing for nothing, and we can install it. So there's 2 no votes on the extreme end of what we're looking at. But I certainly am not going to spend $300,000 or $400,000 and then another $300,000 or $400,000 for right turn, left turn, no U-turn, and recalibrating the signals. So we can go with that, solve it, or we can leave it alone. I don't guess we have to have anything done there, but it is a safety hazard. And it's an inconvenience because the people who try to turn left stick out into the lane that they're coming out of. So they've actually got a lane of traffic blocked if they're trying to turn left in there. So, I mean, we can solve it. That temporarily solves it. And going with our next flag waving project.
That temporary thing will be 10 years, you know it. We're not talking a year or two. 10,
got it at
right?
7 o'clock.
10
Well,
years.
Yeah,
Maybe
we've got some
15.
more time, so let's go to item number 9, which is
15. I'll bet you on that.
ordinance 2023-41 to amend Chapter 4, Title 16 Franklin Municipal Code concerning road impact fees.
And again, this is on your 7 o'clock, and you have a public hearing for it. So what we really wanted to use this time is to just be clear about how we structured what's before you. We updated the impact fee ordinance that you had before you, dating back to the spring, to reflect our best estimate or best blending of the discussion we had that we could come up with from the discussion we had 2 weeks ago. And let me touch on a couple of those key elements. First of all, the effective date that we have proposed and the updated ordinance amendment is a July 1, 2025 effective date. We used essentially option E from the list of 10 options that we gave you, but what that is a 4-year phase-in of the new fees and an 8-year window for the grandfathering for projects entitled by July 1, 2025. So it extends the time frame for people to get entitlement, but then provides an 8-year window for grandfathering. And then a couple other key components that we've talked about before, but I want to touch on the idea that we would publish a 5-year future and indexed based on the National Highway Construction Index for those fees. So there'd be some certainty and a schedule that the development community could look at and know what those fees are projected out in a 5-year window. We would also, again, provide for that 8-year grandfathering based on projects entitled by July 1, 2025, and then a 10% indexing through that 8-year timeframe. And then we did come up with a different approach, a little different approach on the payment, and wanted to draw that to your attention. We had been talking about a 2-phase payment, 25% at permit and 75% at final inspection. We'd suggest a little different approach. Administratively, it's a lot simpler for us to just collect it one time. So the thought was, let's give the applicant a choice where they can pay that impact fee at final inspection, all of it at final inspection, or if they choose, they can pay it when it's paid now, which is at the foundation or building permit, and when they pay it early, we'll give them a 10% discount for paying it early. So there's one collection point, but there is a benefit to paying it earlier. That developer can make a choice on what fits best for them, a later payment or a discounted earlier payment. And that would, from the administrative side, be a lot simpler to collect one fee one time than to have it one piece at one time and then have to come back and get 75% at final inspection. That seems simpler, and also seemed like giving a choice to the applicant might be beneficial. So that's how we wrote it. There wasn't a clear consensus from what we heard 2 weeks ago. Obviously, you can select anything you want. We've attached to it the memo that laid out all 10 options that we looked at, with 3 and 4 and 5-year phase-ins, 5, 8, and 10-year grandfathering periods. So all those combinations are available to you to implement, and any other mix that you'd like. Again, this is second reading. We could amend it tonight however the board would like, and then get that updated for your third and final reading in November. So that's kind of where we are, and our purpose was just to be clear about what's on there so that we don't burn a lot of time on at 7 o'clock explaining what's in here. You can have that in mind and then address it or give us guidance how you'd like to proceed at 7 o'clock. So I'll stop there.
So you're recommending which one, E?
We wrote it as, yes, a 4-year phase-in with an 8-year grandfathering, and then the modified 2 payment options for providing those fees by the applicant.
This, just to be real, I think we could talk about this a lot, but we also received something from NAOP. It looks very similar, but what, can you give us like succinctly what the differences are?
Well, we didn't write it, so we want to be careful how we interpret it, and we just got it last night. But it appears to blend vesting in there, and it also appears to talk about pre-app being the threshold as opposed to entitlement. Those seem to be significant differences, and also makes it much more difficult project by project to look at when was their pre-app, locking fees in there versus when they achieved entitlement for the project, which is a much more concrete step.
Because you could submit a pre-app and change it.
Yeah, you could,
drastically.
there's lots of things that happen in the process from pre-app to going through the rest of the process and getting entitlement. And some projects that happens very smoothly and quickly. Other projects, there are multiple iterations along the way, and it administratively, I think it gets pretty difficult to tie back to when was pre-app versus, and what was that project versus what project actually got entitled.
And pre-app is really more of an opportunity for a developer to bounce things off and find out what's the easiest way to be totally compliant with our ordinances.
Get feedback.
Whereas, yeah, and get feedback, and whereas if it's entitled, that means that it's had a vote and created a date certain.
Vernon, anything else to add?
Yeah, Vernon,
No. Eric, good evening. Eric and the mayor explained that well. The pre-app doesn't apply to every project. But as the mayor mentioned, when you have a development plan, there's a date certain, a public vote that entitles the project. When you have a site plan, the majority of them go to the planning commission. If it doesn't part of a development plan, you have a date certain, a public vote. So that's really the key and a measurable milestone that would apply to projects.
But it did seem to say the 4-year phase and the 8-year grandfathering was also in there too. So there's elements that are consistent, but this piece is different and probably administratively challenging, honestly.
I do have 3 speakers, if I can go ahead and ask them, and being consistent, they have 90 seconds each, starting with Glenn McGee, Alex Chambers, followed by Rachel Blackhurst. So. Alex, you running away?
Short line.
Were we not supposed to sit down here?
You can be wherever you want.
Anywhere you want.
We're flexible. Go ahead, Mr. McGee.
I want to thank everyone, and, so I wasn't sure whether we were going to be able to speak now or at the public hearing, but I'll go ahead and use my 90 seconds. But, I took to heart something the vice mayor said a few work sessions ago when he made the comment that it seemed like we were talking a lot about grandfathering and those kind of things, but no one really seemed to be here talking about what the future fee would be. And I think at that time, we just so happened to have a tenant in town. It was a 10,000 square foot, a very nice restaurant. It would be classified as a restaurant quality under the ordinance. And I compared it, and I made a spreadsheet, and I'll be happy to pass this out to everybody. But it's consistent with the Perry's, which was 10,554 square feet. Today, that impact fee is $213,000. Once implemented, fully integrated fee, that'd go to $635,000. And at 213 is one of the highest that I've found in any community where Perry's does business today. Interestingly enough, where we did a Chipotle at 2,500 square feet, today that impact fee would be $73,000, and in the future would be $172,000. Fully integrated. Fully integrated, that's $69 a square foot to the building. The shell cost us about $500 today. And I know we were talking a few weeks ago about affordability and getting the Hill project done. This is an expensive community to do development in, and that project can't even happen even with city involvement. So I would say that Chipotle does $3 million on average in the country. I understand the one on our property is doing almost $4 million. Property tax wise, that's $400,000 a year to the city. That's substantial money, well over $110,000 a year. That's what you're looking for is recurring income. Carmel, Indiana, who was in here last week, they have 69 TIF districts in that community of 103,000 people, right? They have double the property tax rate we do in our city. So
You finish up. That was abrupt.
No, I was just going to say that, this is a holistic problem. So I'm not here to say we shouldn't have fees. I get tired of hearing say pay your fair share when we've gone outside the box and spent more than our fair share because we've been asked generous by the city to do that as developer. I'm a small business owner here. I don't know what the economic impact is of this long term, but you're making decisions today for what it's going to be 10 years from now. where you want to put properties into production. And I think that's what the Carmel mayor was trying to say last week when he's saying, let's put properties in production, let's get fees. So anyway, sorry about that.
Alex, are you next or Rachel?
All right, thank you for having us again. Apologies for the moxie of sending a full ordinance. We were just, in the interest of time, like, what can we help you all visualize what we're proposing? Just to be efficient, giving the quick turnaround. We do really appreciate the efforts around the discussion on grandfathering and phase-in. What we were just hoping to accomplish in our proposal yesterday was to just clearly define what constitutes grandfathering. So we just have that in the ordinance so that it's never up for discussion if a project is grandfathered in or not. And then also just show a preference for a phase-in that starts really low and then builds at the last, the fifth year versus starting high and then fifth year jump is smaller. And then also just adding that provision that would make this exponential fee increase more digestible, which is calculating the fee earlier. And I think we can be flexible, whether that's at pre-app or I think we mentioned entitlement, but something that's earlier than building permit application. Just makes it easier for these guys when they're working on their pro forma. And, I think we've been very, very focused on these compromises, and that's been great. Those are the really two big pain points for the development community. But I hope that we aren't losing focus of how huge these increases are. You mentioned in the development report earlier that to date this year, you've collected $9 million in road impact fees. But for some of these developments in the room, if these impact fees are fully implemented, their road impact fee alone is going to be $50+ million. It's a huge amount of money that they're being asked to absorb. So, thank you.
Thank y'all, and I'm going to be repeating a bunch of what you just heard, but again, thank y'all very much. We've all spent a lot of time on this, but I think we're actually this close. I don't think we're quite there yet, but this close. Just reiterate how much we'd appreciate, stair-stepping the increases, doing it over 5 years, letting those that have invested down here, we have dollars in the ground, get ahead of these increases and start building projects, provide retail sales taxes, hotel, motel tax, property tax, and those, which are the best. They're recurring, and you can use them however you want them. And we're just trying to get ahead of these increases, and maybe even provide alternative income to the city by the impact of these developments. Again, setting the fee at the time of entitlement is kind of between the building permit and the pre-app meeting, which I get. I am a little confused about what entitlement means in that chart. It's a little unclear to me what date that is. Vernon and I were talking about this earlier, and both in the PUD environment, it's a little bit easier. In a base zoning that hasn't necessarily had to go in front of BOMA, that's a little bit more difficult. I mean, half of ovation is base zoning. We can bring it in the PUD, we cannot. And so that is, to me, very confusing, and I would want to make sure we're very clear on that. And then I'll just end by saying, no matter what happens tonight or when we get this finished, the development community, NAIOP, we're all committed to also looking at all these alternative financing structures that are, might have to go through the state or do all these other things. We understand y'all need money to build roads, and we're for it, obviously. But it's really hard to pay for all this out of our pockets. So anything we can do, and it'll be something we'll be working together on, and we'll continue working on those efforts.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
I just want to say I agree wholeheartedly. It's not one thing, it's got to be a lot of things. Just yesterday, I shared with Eric 2 ideas for TIF districts that I have here. I am a fan of us using all the tools in the toolbox. I want us to be using TDRs. I want us to be using TIF districts. I want to be using all these tools. There is heartburn amongst others to doing these things. I think, they're complex. They can be challenging. but they are the tools that the state gives us that we can use to build our community and not put burden on any one group of people. And until we start using all the tools, we're going to put undue burden on any one group of people. So yes, we got to raise impact fees. There's no question. I like the step back because I think we just need a little bit of time to get people comfortable with the idea of bringing some of the tools online. And maybe by the time the next step or the third step happens in that step back, maybe we get some comfort level with people bringing on board some other tools to help us out. So appreciate your comment.
Alderman Blanton.
Agreed. I think what gives me the biggest heartburn is that you can't go back from this. I can't ever see a time when we're going to go, oh, you know what? We don't need road impact fees anymore. And you think about what is that tipping point? And once the east side, and I'm just going to focus on the east side of the interstate, once that's all developed and we don't have this great scamper around to look for money to build roads, that's one thing. But my biggest fear is it ever going to be done? Because we have a problem of being able to provide a balanced opportunity for people to live here. You can call it affordable, you can call it attainable, or what have you. But we're almost exacerbating the problem ourselves because there's no other option than for developers to be able to pass that along to the buyer or the renter or whatever. And we're creating the problem, making it even worse ourselves. But the biggest fear is, and I've heard it, and I'm sorry to say this publicly, from people, we got this one last project and we're not developing in Franklin anymore. It's gotten too hard, it's too expensive, and we're planning for a future that may not happen. And that's the biggest fear. You talk about people who want to come here. I know there was one anecdote about somebody in Texas that was said their fees were $600,000 in Texas. Those same fees are 2.1 here. And that's before the increase. So they're like, peace out. I'm not going to Franklin. Wanted to be there, heard great things about it, but that's cost prohibitive. I think the key is holistic, because in the last 2 weeks, we finally start bringing into the discussion, yeah, they're going to help pay their proportionate share for roads and water and sewer, but do we even figure that when we're talking about a commercial building, the use is also going to pay into our general fund with property taxes, with sales tax, with hotel motel? And we're trying to capture all these things to get things built, but we're forgetting to throw everything out and figure out how it all shifts, because if we don't have it, we're not going to have more hotel motel. We're not going to have more sales tax. It's a struggling economy for those of us who live here already. I can only imagine what we're doing to exacerbate that. So that's my statement. My question is, didn't we talk about a 5% indexing originally? Because somebody said 10% was proposed.
We talked about both.
Okay. So
You can tell us what
10%
you want
is
that
what's
to be.
in the ordinance.
Yeah, you can tell us what you want that to be.
The other question talked about the 10% discount if they paid it up front. That's not necessarily apples to apples. Is there a cap for how much that 10%? Like if somebody's got a Ovation, 10% is a lot different kind of money than a Chipotle. Are we thinking ahead about that, of what that 10% might look like? And, you know what I'm saying? Is that something we need to consider? Is it?
We did not, because we thought there's a benefit, and that's a choice and a flexibility we're offering the development side. So
Just
if
wanted
you
to
want
throw
to,
that
you
out
could do
there.
that, but we did not think about capping it because we thought that's a choice, and there's a benefit
Understand.
to us getting that earlier, but there's a benefit for them that they can consider how that fits in their pro forma timeframe wise.
Understood. I just think this whole massive 300% increase we're doing with all these different fees is really going to shoot us in the foot down the road. So I think we've got to have wisdom. We have to try to think about what this looks like and how it's going to affect our community at large. So
I think we have to make sure we're not making something so complicated that nobody understands it. So the simpler we can keep it, the better. I'm going to recognize Alderman Potts. I'm going to ask the Vice Mayor to give me about 2 minutes. And
yes, sir.
So when I come back, are there white flags or red flags?
I'm gonna wave a
I'll be
white
right
flag.
back.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did have a question, and it was more just to provide those who are here in the room or those who may be watching, and Rachel, this is directed to you. Could you share with everybody the 5-year implementation? Why it landed on a 10%, 15, 15, 30, and a 30?
So the goal was just, as folks are planning, as if you have a project that's entitled after July 1st, 2025, that doesn't fall into the grandfathering, you're in a position where you still have done a lot of work on your financing. So just, if you're going in the first year, it's not 30%. And it's, again, it's not a 30% increase from where the fees are now, it's 30% of total.
Okay, three people.
And just for simplicity, I'll rephrase it. It's the 5-year rollout, and you had a 10%, 15%, 15%, 30%, 30%. You were given the details as to how you landed on that and why that was important.
Yes, again, for the projects that are going to be ready to go, they're not grandfathered in, but they might be ready to go sooner. Have it not be a huge jump for them. And I was kind of going into, it's not a 30%, if you started out higher, like 30% or 25%, 25%, 25%, it's 25% of the total projected increase, not just a 25% increase from what they're paying now. So try to stair step it so that it's not as big up front.
And I appreciate that, and that's something that some people had a question about. Why not just go ahead and do 20% every single year for 5 years? And so that helps us to understand that. I do think that there's some opportunity here. Last time we all spoke, when we looked at it, and I've been a proponent of a 5-year rollout since the beginning, it's important for us to understand it's sometimes a flat rate of 20% across the board really isn't the best for business as it is. As you just said, they've already moved along and they're pro forma where they are right then. So I think that gives us an opportunity, and I know we're going to dig deeper into this, but I'm still of the mindset, a 5-year rollout with either an 8-year grandfathering or a 10-year grandfathering. And the difference on that right now, if you're looking at a 4-year with a 10-year grandfathering or a 5-year with a 10-year grandfathering, the difference is only $11.7 million. Now, we are bringing in less money. It's only 178.6 versus some larger figures. And the largest that we go to collectively was right at $192 million based on 5 different plans. So we're really talking just at about somewhere between 10 to just under $12 million right now across these 4-year rollouts and 5-year rollouts, an 8-year or 8-year or 10-year grandfathering. So again, staff did a great job. This is on slide 11 on the presentation that we've been looking at.
Alderman Barnhill, and then I'll go to Alderman Berger.
We could pick out any scenario and compare it to another scenario. In what I would term the best case scenario for the city, which would be the most that you could collect. If I'm not wrong, the difference between it and 8 that we're being proposed is about $50 million. Am I right? Did you it's
That range of all the different.
yeah, that range of all different things. $50 million is what we are looking at. And what we're being told, what we're looking here for is $181 million versus $232 billion. Somewhere, somehow, someplace, I don't know how you don't have to make up that $50 million somewhere else. Now, whether it falls on the development community or whether it falls on that person who's lived in the city for 10 years, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, or 70, it has to be made up somewhere. Or we don't build the roads. Now, if we don't build the roads, then we're not going to accommodate the new business that's coming in. I mean, I guess it's the chicken or or the egg, whichever way you want to look at it. But I don't. First off, I don't agree with grandfathering. That's the biggest thing that I don't agree with. I might be able to come and I might be able to go with a 3-year phase in, or a 4 or a 5 or 6 maybe, but no grandfathering in there. Because first off, I think it's a nightmare to have to keep up with. Now, did I get a head shake on that? Yes, I did. So why would we want to make it even more complicated to keep up with, to pay, to have everything that's done here? And I understand that they're bringing in sales tax, and they're bringing in property tax, and they're bringing in something else. We're losing out on 50 million under the best case scenario in here, versus what Eric said is the general agreement, compromised agreement between the 8 of us. My agreement was compromised, so to speak, because I never went for 8, and I never went for 5 and 8-year grandfather. But if there's people looking and there's people sitting out there now, you've got to think about this, because this has to be paid for some way or another. And don't expect to lower the impact fees and have that much more business, because that doesn't compute. I will make my favorite statement, I guess. We've had the impact fee since 1988. And we went through this, I promise you, we went through the same thing. It may have not been quite as sophisticated as scenario A and scenario B, but we went through it. We said the same thing. You're going to kill business. You're going to kill business. And we've been saying that now for 40 years, 35, whatever it is. But I don't think it's going to kill business. I think you have to have some way of paying. You got a capital improvements list here. We're going to look at that in a minute. There is 35 million here, 40 million here, 25 million there. That has to come from somewhere. And so that's pretty much mine. I'll lower the flag. It's at half mast right now anyway, so.
Alderman Berger.
Well, I would support the 5-year phase-in and the 10-year grandfathering, but I look at this a little differently. It's a long-term development scenario that I'm looking at, economic development, because we talked about making up the shortfall if we choose something lower, but and sales tax and property tax aren't going to do it. Well, we're in a little different place than we were in the 1980s and 90s. And you look around and our country is in huge debt. Our county is over $1 billion in debt. We've got a lot going on here. And we have lenders that don't want to lend. We have financiers that give all these risk takers and developers a lot of heartburn. And these people are the risk takers, and they have investors and financiers and banks to deal with. And then when you sign a contract with these people to come in and be tenants in your buildings, and then you say, well, your $3,000 a month fee just went up to $8 or $6 or $8,000, you can tear up the contract because they're going to leave. They can't do it. And the big people, the big heavy-duty, deep pockets maybe, but how often do you get those people? So I look at this a little differently. I think the lower impact fees help the businesses, and we kill business when we look at things that in the end or in the long term is not going to be sustainable. And so I was looking at the inception, we collected over 115 million some odd dollars since up until June 30th. in impact fees. And since inception, we collected, spent 91 million. So we got about 24 million we haven't spent yet in this. And I looked at your chart, Glenn, and that bothered me. That bothered me a lot, and I'm not even in your shoes. But bottom line, I just think there's more of a sense of urgency here than we need to have. I mean, we got to get it done. I'm not arguing with administration. I'm not arguing that we need to get this done. But the sense of urgency, I've heard a lot of questions here tonight. I have a lot of questions more, and more questions, and I hear questions from the board. I hear questions from you all. And so I don't know if we fully vetted to the best practices of any other cities. I haven't seen that. I have not seen the vetting of the economic development impact. So for some of these major developments like Boyle, South Star, Highwoods, I've not actually seen the numbers. I know you all have done some studies on it. I'd like to see that. I think the board needs to see that. Because Clyde makes a good point, but the thing is, it's satisfaction now or long-term, short-term satisfaction, and then everybody goes away and people start falling off the edge of the earth and go, well, you know what? We can't really make it happen here anymore. Because guess what? The people you want to write those contracts with are saying no. And that's the problem I see long-term. I'm trying to look really long-term on this stuff. So we're going to have to find some ways, I think, maybe some savings and going, we're going to have to raise impact fees, that's given. But I'm just not satisfied that we've not vetted the best practices around from other cities yet that I have seen. And I have information on that entity as well that Brandy cited, that they paid $665,000 in Texas, and today, if they came in, it was 1.3 mil, but under this new, it's 3.2. Might as well say goodbye, because that's probably not going to happen. Anyway, it's not sustainable for economic development. Chamber needs to be weighing on this. The Chamber needs to be doing some research on this, and I just feel uncomfortable that we've not done enough work. We've done a boatload. Staff's done a boatload. Eric, Vernon, y'all have done amazing work and a long term over the last few years on this. And it pains me to say I still think there's more work to be done because there's questions being asked here. Chamber has not weighed in on economic development. I want to see some more of those numbers. And so, and also I've been thinking, have we just been looking at this through accountants' lens, through a lens of accountants, rather than looking through the lens of accounting and economic development both? I just feel like we've only done the accounting look at. And at least for me, I can speak for myself. The other thing is, how about quality of development? I've got two more points here. How about quality of development? It takes a hit. If developers have to cut corners, and they will, because of the cash flow, the borrowing, the quality of development goes down. And mark my word, and then we have to ask ourselves, is that what we want for our community? We have to say, oh, they'll always build here because they always have done so. That might have been true, but it's not always true. And they've always built here. They're going to always build here no matter what.
Go ahead and be winding up.
I will.
Your last point, please.
But this is down and dirty called business. Business. And if the numbers don't, you all run your own businesses. I did too. You've done your own business. And if the numbers don't match, guess what? We're out. So, yeah. So if these things don't come together, we take a huge hit, I think, on economic development. And like I was just thinking about the parkland dedication fees, and we've got arterial fees, but they aren't necessarily spent in the area of development like our parkland dedication fees are. So I think in closing, I'll just say that I want more in-depth look at this. I'm not ready to vote on it. I think we need better vetting of best practices outside Tennessee. Maybe we have a large meeting with BOMA, the development community, the consultants, the chamber. There's just too many other unanswered questions and not enough weigh-in. But you all, impact fees are certainly important. But in the long run, again, economic impact from these commercial developments are so much greater than for our community. So we look at the impact fees.
If you'll go ahead and finish up, we got other
Okay,
people
if
want
we
to
look
speak.
at the impact fees, look long-term at everything everybody brings to the table for economic development for our city and long-term stability and sustainability, those fees we should be able to get back. So I think going with something more reasonable is to my liking because of that.
Okay, Alderman Baggett.
Be quick.
I've said that before. It doesn't
5 years. I've had a change of heart and mind on this because while sitting here for a few reasons, I had a lot of time to think during the other comments. But second of all, we're only 25% phased in on the water and sewer fees. We've got a whole list of additional fees that are coming up. Additional fees. The math works. And I know the math. What you said is right. The money has to come from somewhere. But you don't take into account that the property taxes that we'll be generating off of these projects, the sales taxes we're going to be generating off of these, those are significant, especially some of the larger ones. And that's how we fund the city. That's how this isn't we were thinking about this very siloed. And I said this from the very start on this. I would love to have seen all of our impact fees and doing it at once. But I know that's really hard to do. I know that's complicated for us to absorb. I know that's complicated to present and for the development community to digest. But the reality is that I do fear if we add the others. And I looked at the development report tonight. I said I was going to be quick. I'm getting off. But I looked at the development report tonight, and the water and the sewer impact fees and the magnitude that we collected over and above what we did in past years. And if we had implemented the full sewer impact fee all at once, like what that number would have been. And in the double-digit millions of dollars, and maybe we need it, but $20 million, it's 4 times what we saw. So I just really am hesitant to. So it's not really deviating far from what we've talked about, but 5-year rollout, similar increase on the phasing. I think I'm convinced Alderman Potts has convinced me, among others, and it should not be equivalent increases. Because you're right, the first couple of years, you have someone who just took down a property, it's really fairer to have that be stair-stepped up. I think that it makes sense from a business standpoint. I would not want the 10%, I want the 5% increase annually instead of the 10. I do want to come back and define entitlement. That's a very fair question. And if I owned a piece of property and I was planning on developing, but I had in a base zoning, but I hadn't got my site plan yet, I mean, that is kind of a nebulous thing that that really needs to be defined. There's no site plan, but you've taken down a massive piece of property. And how do we, anyway, I think that's a big risk to some large developments that are important to the city. It needs to be defined. And then they ask for 8-year grandfathering, so we'll stick with 8-year. But I'm nervous that that you're going to come to us in another 6 months. There's going to be another fee, and y'all are going to be sitting here in front of us again, and then we're going to be talking about how. And then we add all these fees up, and you really are not going to have projects that start. And I don't know why we live in this vacuum that we think that there's infinite amount of money. There is an end to it, and these figures, when your impact fees are more than your land. And by the way, I've not met with any of these people since we last met. This is coming straight from me. But there is a point, and we're disregarding the fact that there is a point to some degree that when we start adding all these fees up, that we're still going to have development. We might, but it might be 15 years from now, and then we're not collecting any money. In Alderman Barnhill, we're going to have zero money for roads from these impact fees because they're not going to do it, and I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it because I'm not going to invest in something that's going to lose money. Why should we expect them to invest in something that's going to lose money? So I think we need to look, I mean, I hate to do this because it's ridiculous but but this is still has got to be vetted out. We can talk about it at 7, but mine is 5 years phasing, 5% increase, define entitlement better, 8-year grandfathering. That was as quick as I could go.
Okay, that
Fees
was
paid
really
well?
quick.
Like they've got it written.
I'd like to carry this discussion on into the voting session. I do have one speaker on item number 10, and I don't want to not recognize him for his 90 seconds. So Ned Dannenberg, come on up, and you have 90 seconds to talk on item 10, which is the capital improvement plan CIP rankings. Let her rip.
Thank you, Ned, for being here.
Okay, so I want to let you know, guys, we actually had a great walk bike to school day with Franklin Elementary this morning. So you really get to see the joy of those kids' faces when they're out, getting to see their friends and not just strapped in their car seat. Franklin Police helped us with their bike patrol, so please check out those photos on social media. I wanted to say all that because of many of the CIP projects coming up have profound impacts on how we experience our community. Folks know that because we live here. That's why a dozen neighbors have come up in the last year asking for sidewalks on their roads because they see the dangers every day. I don't think anyone's actually come up here asking for an intersection redesign to save 15 seconds, making a turn at rush hour. So it's fantastic that from the list I've seen, the board agrees that Eddie Lane needs to really be rebuilt as a street that can be enjoyed by all the families that live there. Still want to be a stronger voice for our friends over on Franklin Green. We know that West Haven's being required to build out their own sidewalk at their expense on Boyd Mill. It's because we know the sidewalks can get used, but I think it's up to you all to finish the gap on the rest of Boyd Mill and make it safe for every road, every neighborhood that it touches. So I know it's all about choices and there are lots of things to rank. I think it would be wrong though for pedestrian safety to take a backseat to some of these car projects like supersizing Mallory Lane intersections. And then I was thinking when leaders were here from around the region for Vision Franklin last week, they wanted to check out our historic downtown, our smartly planned neighborhoods, maybe our greenways and trails. I don't think there was a bus tour of our interstate on-ramps. So let's invest in the things that our people and our neighbors are here and they've been asking for, not just wider roads to let people drive as fast as possible, but we do want a stronger community for the adults and kids that live here every day. On the mark.
Perfect.
Right on the number.
Okay, right on. We'll be back in a few minutes.
For those